Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Restaurant Incubator. My name is Brandon Sharp. I'm your host. I won 7 Michelin stars. I own and operate 3 restaurants in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. There's some stuff I really want to cover on a pod, but I also got to make dinner for my kids. And so if my dogs wander through, if my kids wander through, I'll try to play it cool. You just do the same. So today I want to talk about, so we have 3 restaurants, all right, and we are looking to do more. And we're not looking to do more in some, reckless, damn the torpedoes fashion. We do it in a very methodical fashion. But at the same time, so when we opened Hawthorne and Wood a little over 6 years ago, it was a year or more of planning and work that went into it um, before we even started construction, right? And so nobody knew who we were. I was talking to real estate brokers, and my real estate broker for Hawthorne and Wood ended up being a great guy um, named Hunter Stewart, and he was out of Raleigh, and he didn't know me from Adam, but he was on his way up, and I was trying to be on my way up, and now he's a big time CRE broker over in Raleigh, and I don't think he would even deal with a first time private restaurant owner like me at this point, but Hawthorne and Wood made it for itself and did well and continues to do well. And so then with Bluebird, we had a little bit more traction. We had a little bit more name recognition. The brokers representing landlords were a little bit more excited to talk to us than they had been the first time around. And so then with Proximo, which has been open 9 months now, but has been in the planning stages for probably over a year and a half, maybe 2 years, that was, there we were able to, really find a landlord whose values mirrored ours downtown, who really wanted to see downtown prosper again. And this landlord had said no to, the types of national chains and regional chains that keep snapping up vacant restaurant spaces on Franklin Street and just fail time after time. It's so predictable. And honestly, our CPA over in Durham, who's been doing our restaurants since year one, used to work for the North Carolina Department of Revenue. And he said that for restaurants on Franklin Street, they didn't ever even bother to audit them because none of them even lasted 3 years. So, that's, and that has kept me away from Franklin Street for a long time. But there has been a groundswell lately of locals who want to see, quality restaurants and things for locals and adults and not just college students to do at night downtown, because downtown is kind of slipping away in a lot of ways. So all of which is to say that we still continue to pursue restaurant opportunities on a regular basis. And I'm riding a bit of a high right now because nothing has come to fruition, nothing has set in stone. But today is June 18th, and I just had 3 or 4 conversations today with landlords, brokers, potential investors, and those types of folks about, because a couple spaces have come open that I did know about, a couple of spaces have come open that I had to be told about. And now, when I say we, at this point, I mean Neil, me, and Elizabeth, reach out to those people with land or with with spaces or with money, they're excited to hear from us. So that's a very cool thing. Now, unfortunately, and this is what I wanted to make today's podcast about. Unfortunately, in the last 4 months, we have had 2 deals go south. That one of them I was like 85 to 90% sure was going to go through. So, again, unfortunately, I can't name names because I'm still under NDAs, and an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. So I can't really talk about the name of the space or the address of the space that we were looking at. But there is a 6,000 square foot space of a restaurant that was recently built out. It has been a generational restaurant. It's a legacy restaurant space. It has been different restaurants in Chapel Hill for over 40 years. Some have been loved and adored and legendary and lasted decades, and a couple have been flops, frankly. And so the one that was most recent was a flop. And this was a space that we had looked at actually before we opened Bluebird in July of 2022. Found the landlords to be unreasonable. There was a ton of work above the ceiling and below the floor. So tons of HVAC stuff on the roof that had to be redone, and tons of plumbing and drainage and sewage work below the floor that needed to be done. So the problem as a restaurateur, as opposed to a building owner and restaurateur, with making those repairs is that you can't take them with you, right? If I spend money to cut the floor, reroute the drain pipes and things like that, or I spend money to put new HVAC units on the roof that may have a lifespan of 10 or 20 years, when my lease is up and my restaurant closes and I move on, those things aren't coming with me. So those are completely sunk costs up front. Those are huge cash expenditures in the pre-opening stages before I brought in any money, and I basically get no return on them other than the right to spend money to use the space. So that is a bad investment, and that is really what that landlord was holding us to when we looked at this space for Bluebird 3 years ago. So fast forward to this winter, again, our broker, who is a former restaurant guy, is always on the lookout for us. He knew that this space was coming available. He called us and we said, yes, we're interested. And so it's down on the west end of Franklin Street. And so not the east end where Proximo is, but it's down on the west end of Franklin Street, and prime location, amazing foot traffic, beautiful space, outdoor space, high ceilings, everything just redone. I think they must have spent $2 million on the build out, because the place really was falling apart. They brought everything up to code, new floors in the kitchen. They spent a lot of money on the decor. Most of that we would paint over and change the finishes on, because it was pretty garish. But one of the great things about the deal was, because what the landlord wanted for cost per square foot, and what he wanted for lease term and that sort of thing was average. It wasn't great. It was average, and there's no TI. There's no tenant reimbursement dollars, because the space had just gotten, like I said, about a $2 million upgrade. So the big key for us was that the equipment was going to convey. And so when I say that, I mean tables, chairs, everything behind the bar, everything under the bar, every piece of equipment, from freaking spoons and spatulas to 72-inch grills and planches and double convection ovens and fryers and hot wells and heat lamps and everything like that in the kitchen, right? So probably at least, conservatively, $500,000 in equipment, probably more, because the space was so big. Yeah, I mean, forks, knives. The tables and chairs were beautiful. The plateware, some of it was usable. And so it was like, okay, this is a fantastic idea. It seemed like a win-win, because the landlord gets a proven operator to come into the space and take it over. And there's no steakhouse downtown. There's one that is over near Hawthorne and Wood, and it's fine, but it's not that big. And so we just wanted a big classic steakhouse downtown. We had a great idea for doing lunch down there, because there's no, most people, there's a at the Carolina Inn, a lot of people go there for lunch if they are having a more formal or a business lunch. Other than that, there's not really a ton of places. So we had Dan Jackson on the podcast a few weeks ago, right? Of Osteria Georgie. A lot of people go to Osteria Georgie and have a great lunch there. But, I really thought there was room in the market to have a steakhouse style lunch. And, there would just be like a one petite filet in terms of steak on the menu, but great burger, great steak sandwiches, and a lot of entree salads. So I really thought there was I still think that there's an opportunity for a great lunch crowd down there. So we're moving ahead, right? We go in there with our contractor at least 3 times. We walk through it with the contractor, with the electrician, with the electrician's lead assistant. We talk about lighting, we talk about layout. We have the architect go in there. She, remeasures the place and redraws the plans. We pay for her to do that. And we're really moving ahead at full speed. So Elizabeth works on the logo, starts working on the mood board and the design, starts pricing out, bar stools and things like that, because there's some things, most of the tables and chairs we can keep. Some things we will need to redo. Neil and I look at the outdoor space, like how are we going to design this? There's a huge patio out there that's covered and lit with fans for tables and chairs. And there's another big dance floor section of the outdoor patio that's uncovered. And it's either in the, I guess in fall and spring, it's nice out there, but in summer, it's just going to cook out there. And then winter, you're not going to want to be out there at all. So we were trying to think of, okay, are we going to have games out here? Are we going to have lounge seating? Are we going to have fire pit? Are we going to have standing rails? And so just coming up with all these ideas and great revenue opportunities. So I put together the business plan. We come up with a great name for it. So this section of Chapel Hill, which is kind of right near the Carborough Chapel Hill line. They're two small towns and they abut one another. They're right up next to each other. One flows right into the other. Anyway, that section of town is called Midway. So we just went with Midway Steak, which I think is a great name for it. Started putting together the menu. I have a chef buddy who was going to work with us as a consultant and really get it up and off the ground until we found the executive chef. And we get the LOI. So it took a little back and forth on the LOI, which is the letter of intent, but not much. And like I said, our broker is a former restaurant owner and restaurant guy. The landlord's broker, he brought in a new broker this time. Instead of a traditional CRE broker like we dealt with 3 years ago, brought in a guy who is also a former restaurant owner and restaurant guy. So we're all speaking the same language, and we all see that this is a great opportunity. And I draw up the budget for this. It looks like this restaurant is going to bring in, if half my assumptions are right, worst case scenario is going to bring in $2.5 million a year. Best case scenario could bring in $8 million a year. I really think that this would be a $6 million a year top line revenue restaurant, which is fantastic. And so, a lot of y'all have questions. I read a lot of questions about how do I price my menu? What should my food cost be? Why does food cost matter when it's really just about money you put in the bank? Well, with steakhouses, so as I've written before and probably told you before, you can't put a percentage in the bank, right? And I'm sure that some director of finance or accountant or somebody like that is going to tell you that along the way. So if you haven't heard from them, well, you're hearing it from me. So you can't take a percentage to the bank. You put dollars in the bank, not percentages. So, if you're running a soup restaurant, your margins might be great, right? You're charging $8 for a cup of soup, and it costs you $1 to make, right? So what's your food cost on that? 12.5%, right? 1 out of 8. So you're putting $7 in the bank for every cup of soup. And let's say you sell 100 cups of soup a day, you're putting $700 in the bank. Well, if you're selling a steak for $50 and your food cost on that steak is 40%, it costs you $20 to put that steak on the plate. Very high food cost percentage, right? 40%. Like, man, that'll never make money. Well, if you sell 100 of those and your margin is $30, then you're putting $3,000 in the bank, which is a whole lot more than 700. So it ain't all about food cost percentage. So, your menu needs to have workhorses like the soup, that are going to help you utilize scraps. If you have a soup du jour, right, that can mostly be made of scraps and leftovers and things like that. That does not need to be premium ingredients that go into your soup du jour. So your soup special, your soup of the day, that should be a very low cost item for you. Not sure what that was. That should be a very low cost item for you, right? And then your steak, that's your moneymaker, right? But it comes at a high cost. And so you got to protect against pilferage, you got to protect against spoilage. Anyway, I'm getting off track. But anyway, steakhouses can be great moneymakers. And we scoped out this part's going to be the wine room. We're going to have an all new world wine list. We started looking at like the blue chip Napa Reds we wanted to bring in and all this fun stuff, right? And so I sent the business plan out to the investors. I wrote up the budget. I wrote up the pre-operating budget. I wrote up the pro forma, and that all packaged all that together. And so I took each investor through the space. We walked through it. We explained it to them. And they were excited about it as well. And so it really looked like this was going to happen. And so then, okay, so the LOI is signed, so the letter of intent is signed, so we agree with the landlord on basic terms, right? Well, then we get the lease, and my broker called me, and he's like, "Look, I'm just going to warn you. There's a lot of stuff in here that you're not going to like. It's a lot of stuff in here that I don't like, and we're kind of at a bit of a stopping point right now." And so, there were some wild clauses in there about what happens if they would not guarantee. They said they would not guarantee that we would get to hold a lease and continue the restaurant if the building were sold. And basically, you have to read between the lines, because that's not the language that's on there. It's not that explicit. It just says landlord has the right to terminate lease, with no notice, or with 90 days notice, or 180, or whatever it was notice. And it's like, well, that's crazy. That means that we could spend all this money on the build out and be open for, literally 2 weeks. And they could say, you know what, we're terminating your lease. So we pushed back on that really hard, and we made some headway, and we came to common ground. And that process, and they had told us, like, look, we want to have it's March 1st. We have the LOI done. We want to have a signed lease by March 31st. We want good to go, start pulling permits on April 1st. Tell your contractor. And we said, okay, great. Well, after we signed the LOI, it took them, I think, 2.5, maybe 3 weeks, even to get that first version of the lease that I just referred to back to us. So we're already way behind, and we're trying to open in late July or early August, so we can get a little runway under us, because football season is coming, right? The students come back mid-August, and the first football game is actually, this year it's on Monday night. It's on Labor Day, and it's a big game. We have a new head coach, and it's going to be featured on ESPN Game Day. So we really wanted to be able to capitalize at the steakhouse on the new football season. So we hash out that one term of the lease, and I think we're okay. Things are moving along. We're moving forward, and then the freaking Rooker calls me again and says, "You're not gonna believe this." He said, "I'm furious." He said, "The broker on the other side is furious. They just pulled the equipment. The equipment doesn't convey." And that killed the deal. That killed the deal. I remember where I was I took his call. I saw his phone number come up. I was excited. I thought, okay, here we go. We're moving forward. They figured it out on their end. And he said, "You're going to kill me. I'm furious. The other broker's furious. They just pulled the equipment." And so that killed the deal. I was out behind Bluebird, walking through the parking lot all of a sudden in a daze, because all of a sudden this deal was tanked, and it was completely off the table. I have no idea why they did it, but there are many ways in which a deal can fail, and I had not been confronted with this one before, and there are many more that I'm sure that I will that have yet to come to me. So anyway, that killed the deal, because if the equipment doesn't convey, that means that is another, probably $1 million that we need to raise to get this off the ground, or at least, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And at this point, one creative way to help finance your restaurant is through equipment leases. And that is it's very tough to get a loan to open to any new business, but especially a new restaurant. SBA loans are a good choice, and that's what we have for Hawthorne and Wood. But the amount of work that goes into getting an SBA loan is a full-time job for almost 6 months. It is unbelievable how onerous and painful it is to get an SBA loan over the finish line. So hopefully we won't be doing any more of those. And also because the house that I'm standing in is collateral against the SBA loan. So equipment leases are a creative way to do it. And so if you haven't used equipment leases before, one cool thing about them is that the collateral on your equipment lease is usually the equipment itself. So if you default on that equipment lease, the bank will just come in and they will take those stoves or those tables and chairs or those speakers or whatever that you finance through the equipment lease. And so, but again, the equipment itself is the collateral. You pay principal plus interest on the lease, and then at the end of the lease term, you basically buy whatever equipment that is from them for $1 and it's yours. So that was very helpful in because Bluebird was incredibly expensive for us to build. And so having equipment leases was one of the few ways in which we were actually going to be able to make that project happen. So that deal is dead. Midway Steak will never come to fruition. It will always have been a fantastic idea and one that would have made a lot of people happy, and that one that would have. I still don't understand why the landlord didn't want to go through with this. I never. Maybe someday it will be explained to me. But they are a company from out of state. They own the whole complex. I don't know if they're trying to sell the complex and build. They've already got there's part of it is residential with retail on the ground floor, and it already goes 5 stories in the air with college student housing. So I have no freaking clue. And again, I'm not sure if I ever will. So, and it's still just sitting empty with those stupid neon lights from the previous restaurant in there. And I am very frustrated that it went down that way. It's definitely my loss. It's definitely the town's loss. And but I think it's the landlord's loss too. And I think that they are being short-sighted. But again, obviously, I don't have the entire story. Okay, so that's one of the two that has not come to fruition in the last few months. The other one is on Franklin Street, on East Franklin Street, I should say, because the other one's on West Franklin Street, but it's on East Franklin Street where you have Proximo. You walk in the front door, it is 12 feet, 10 inches wide. That's it. And it goes, I don't know, about 60 feet back. It's a 1,400 square foot restaurant, and that classic Bouchon cork shape. And so a lot of restaurants on East Franklin Street are like that. They're just narrow storefronts and they go deep. And the second space in question was that also. It has an upstairs that in previous times has been used as apartment, studio, different concepts. And so this one is a regional chain. The existing business right now is a regional chain that, it's one of the one that the Proximo landlord said no to. It's just another crappy college town regional chain that is overpriced and poor quality and just not that appealing. And it's just kind of failed. The restaurant doesn't make much money. It's never had any traction. It is owned and operated by a guy who's not a restaurant guy. He has plenty of money from other things, but he's not a restaurant guy, and he doesn't want to be in the operations. He goes down there. He said, once or twice a week if he has to. He's not interested in being there. Doesn't like being there, and I understand why. It's kind of a depressing place the way that he's got it set up. So, and this one came to us through a restaurant broker. So a restaurant broker, their business is selling existing restaurant businesses. So if a restaurant goes out of business, it's too late for the restaurant broker. They want the restaurant to stay in business. So a good thing to do if you were looking to buy a restaurant is to buy a profitable restaurant, because then it has momentum, it has goodwill, it has good systems, it has good people, has a good track record, and it has good cash flow, which is the lifeblood of any restaurant. Taking over a failing business is usually a terrible idea. And we wanted nothing to do with this guy's business. We just wanted the space. So he dropped the price. It was still way, way, way overvalued. And the restaurant broker has sold this space at least 3 times before. So it's this crazy business model for him. I don't not respect it. I don't not understand it. It makes sense. But he keeps selling the same restaurant space over and over, right? And so why would he want to sell it? Why would he want to sell it to capable, proven operators like us? He wouldn't, right? He wants to sell it to some other knucklehead who's going to go out of business in 18 months. And so, talking to investors and then talking over and over to broker friends and especially my lawyer, like they said, you want nothing to do with this. You want nothing to do with this business. The land, like this guy hadn't even told the landlord that he was looking to sell. And, a big part of what we'd be paying for was basically the rights to the lease, but that's worthless. We would have to scrap the lease and start over again anyway. So, um, I emailed the broker. We've been in there. We hadn't been in with the contractor yet, but again, I went through the steps of writing the business plan, writing the budget. Elizabeth designed a beautiful logo. Talked to an artist who was going to do the murals on the walls. We had, finishes picked out. We know where the chairs and tables are coming from. Started scoping out, recipes and menus and hours of operation and all sorts of things like that. And I emailed the broker and said, look, we're interested in an asset purchase, not interested in buying, the business as you have it listed. And, or I texted him and said that. And then he texted back and said, sorry, but it's under contract. I'm like, dumb, who was the dumb son of a bitch that spent well into six figures on this useless asset? So I don't understand it. Like I said, I'm really frustrated by this stuff, and we continue to want to grow and want to expand. On last Thursday's podcast, hopefully you heard me talk about growth with Chef Tom McNaughton, and how it can be a dirty word for first time small business people, and it feels like selling out sometimes. But you have to remember, if you have investors who have given you their money and who are trusting you with their money, they're probably, if they have enough money to invest with you, they are probably really smart with money. And they know that they can either put their money in the S&P in an index fund, right? And probably make 7 to 8% in an average year. And I'm sure they have better ways of making money that they can make more money. Instead, they're gambling with you on something that they know is probably going to fail, right? They're gambling with you on a restaurant. And so if you were then taking their money and you were the constraint and you were saying, yes, I've got your money. Yes, we're successful, but we're not going to grow because I don't want to sell out. That's bad business. And I know I've said that before, but that's something to keep in mind I think the growth mindset is crucial, because without that infusion of money that they gave you, that they gambled with, that they trusted you with, you would not have a business. So I think that growth mindset is crucial. Now, I do think that there is healthy and organic growth. And as I started out saying, we are not trying to force the issue. We are looking for real opportunities. And again, I didn't go and spend, way into six figures on a business that I knew sucked, just to have access to that space, the second concept that I talked about. So anyway, that's the state of things today. We're heading into summer here in Chapel Hill, and a couple restaurants have announced their closure already. We'll see what comes of those. I've got great people who want to work with us, and I want to work with them. I've got concepts. I've got things that I believe will fit market niches. And we are at the point now. I'm very lucky to be at the point now where people want to come and work for us because they see us expanding and growing, and that they want to be part of it. So that's the state of affairs about opening restaurants today. I wanted you guys to hear my firsthand experience, not just anecdotally, not just in the form of like lessons or whatever it is. I want you to know what is going on with me and what my day-to-day is like when it comes to opening restaurants and coming up with concepts and developing them and talking to landlords and brokers and investors and lenders and owners and all this stuff. Because I think if you're listening to this, you're probably out there living it too. I want you to know that I'm living it as well. We're going through this together. And so I continue to learn. And again, I want you to learn from the hard lessons that I'm apparently still going through. So if this podcast was of any use to you, if you enjoyed it today, please give us 5 stars on Apple, give us 5 stars on Spotify. Those ratings go a long way towards helping an underdog podcast like ours reach the type of people that need this information. So stay humble, stay hungry. Talk to you soon.